After the crucifixion, Jerusalem was crowded and tense. Pilgrims came and went. Roman soldiers watched from the fortress above the temple. Inside homes and courtyards, a small community of Jesus' followers met quietly, praying, eating, and repeating the claim that changed everything. He has risen. They were not planning a revolt. They were not raising an army. They were telling what they believed they had seen. And yet, in a city where rumor could spark riot, they were watched. The first arrests after the resurrection were not about theology. They were about order. Temple guards moved in when crowds gathered around these followers. The charges sounded administrative, stirring up the people, teaching in a forbidden name, disturbing the peace near the temple. In a city under Rome, quiet was a kind of law. The men and women were taken to holding rooms, stone and cold, with no verdict yet and no torture. There was a warning first. The council wanted the movement to deflate on its own. A pattern emerged: detain, question, threaten, release, and then watch. Interrogations often happened at night or early in the morning by the light of oil lamps. Officials asked the same questions from different angles. Who else meets with you? Who supports this? Do you deny the Nazarene? Will you stop speaking in his name? And there was no philosophical debate, no elaborate test. The goal was compliance. The followers were warned that continued speaking would bring formal punishment. Their names were recorded, their families were noted, and they were sent home for now. In the ancient world, punishment was not only about pain, it was about shame. To be denounced in front of elders, to be shouted down in a public place, to be labelled disobedient, this isolated a person in a culture built on honour. So the early tactic was simple: make examples. Pull a few leaders in front of a council, issue an official ban on speaking in Jesus' name, and let their neighbours see it. The hope was that fear and embarrassment would do what chains could not. Many followers lost customers. Some were told not to return to the synagogue. Engagements broke. Business partners stepped back. Social gravity started to push them to the edges. When warnings failed, the next step was formal discipline. Not Roman scourging, but Jewish flogging carried out under communal law. It was precise and limited, but brutal. The accused was inspected to determine what he could physically endure. He was tied, his torso bare. An attendant delivered up to 39 blows with a leather strap. The blows landed across the back and sometimes the chest. Scripture was recited, not to entertain the crowd, but to frame the act as correction. It was designed not to kill, but to humble. The message was clear: stop speaking in the forbidden name. Some of Jesus' followers endured this and returned to their people still speaking. Another penalty was less visible and more devastating: exclusion from the synagogue. In the first century, the synagogue was not only worship, it was identity. It was a network for work, charity, and family standing. To be excluded was to lose protection, patrons, and reputation. A widow could no longer rely on the community chest. A craftsman was quietly passed over for jobs. Neighbours avoided eye contact. There was no prison wall here. The fence was social, and it was high. After arrest and flogging came economic pressure. Landlords raised rents. Shopkeepers refused service. Contracts disappeared. The cost of loyalty was paid in lost wages and thin tables. Families split. A brother refused to speak to a sister who insisted the crucified one was the Messiah. A father told a son to renounce this way or leave the house. In some homes, followers slept in doorways or with friends, not because of Roman edicts, but because the front door of their own family would not open. Women who followed Jesus were not immune. They were questioned about meetings in their homes, about who came and what was taught. A woman who rented out a room risked losing her livelihood. A midwife who quietly prayed in Jesus' name risked losing clients. Their leadership was ordinary and brave, hosting, organizing care for widows, teaching children. And for this, they faced the same cycle of summons, shaming, and threat. From the authorities' perspective, the concern was not just belief, it was crowds. The city had seen messianic surges before, brief flashes of charisma ending in violence. A rumour that the executed teacher was alive could be tinder in a dry season. The question was practical. If the preaching continued, would Rome blame them for unrest? Keeping the peace was survival. In that calculus, the followers were a risk. Sometimes hearings spiraled into violence. A speech displeased the assembly. A charge of blasphemy landed like a spark. Mobs moved faster than courts. Stones were nearer than reason. In those moments, process collapsed, and the line between questioning and killing became thin. Word of this travelled quickly through the community. Speak carefully, they learned. The distance between being heard and being harmed was not very far. What surprised even their critics was persistence. After arrest, after threats, after flogging, the followers went back to their gatherings and kept repeating the same claim. They did not switch slogans. They did not recruit soldiers. They broke bread and told what they believed they had seen. Their courage was not flashy. It was stubborn. Neighbors called it foolish. Officials called it dangerous. The community called it obedience. Common sense said, leave the city where you're being watched. But many early followers chose to remain in Jerusalem. They prayed near the temple. They helped the poor in the neighborhoods where they had grown up. They kept meeting in homes. They spoke in public courts and private courtyards. This was not defiance for spectacle. It was witness in place. They believed God had acted in this city, and they would not erase the testimony from this city. Pressure exposed weak seams. When charity was uneven and some widows were overlooked, the followers did not retreat. They appointed trustworthy servants to distribute food daily. Administration became mercy with a schedule. They collected gifts for those fined after floggings. They rotated homes when one host was targeted. They trained new leaders when others were jailed. They baptized quietly in places where water could drown out their voices. Under pressure, their community became more organized, not less. Persecution scattered some followers beyond Jerusalem. But scattering was not only flight, it was seed. Wherever they landed, in coastal towns, along trade routes, in synagogues of other cities, they repeated the pattern. Work by day, meat by night, a table set for the poor, and a story told with care. They did not found political clubs. They formed households of faith. The same charges followed them, disturbing the peace, introducing dangerous ideas, refusing to honor local gods. The same responses followed as well: warning, shaming, and, if they persisted, punishment. At first, Rome saw the Jesus movement as a dispute within Judaism. But as the community spread among non-Jews, officials began to see something else. People who would not offer sacrifice to the gods or to the emperor's image. In Roman eyes, that looked like impiety, even atheism, not atheism in the modern sense, but a refusal to keep the peace of the gods thought to protect cities. Now interrogations changed tone. Provincial governors questioned suspects, sometimes multiple times, asking them to curse Christ and burn incense to the gods. Those who complied were released. Those who persisted were punished by imprisonment, forced labor, or execution, depending on the region and the era. But that came later. The first years were still mostly about local councils, social penalties, and measured whips. Imagine what a flogging day felt like for one follower. He was brought to a courtyard. Friends could not help. They could only watch from the edge. An attendant read the charge aloud. The strap was lifted. The count began. Each strike was measured. The limit was known. No one was trying to kill him. Everyone was trying to stop him. When it ended, he was untied. He breathed in short, careful pulls. He was warned again. He was let go. He walked home with a friend on each side. They cleaned the wounds with water and oil. They prayed not for revenge but for courage to be gentle tomorrow. After arrest, there were costs you could not see. There was the way neighbors stepped off the path to avoid brushing his robe. There was the silent table when a father refused to speak to his daughter. There was a landlord's shrug as he said, "Someone else has leased your stall." There was the cold of a night outside a house that would not open. These were not laws written on scrolls. They were habits of harm, and they made many disciples quietly heroic. Yet in the middle of all this, the movement grew. The followers responded in ways that undermined the strategy of shame. They refused to lie, even when a quick denial would end a hearing. They paid their taxes, removing an easy accusation of treason. They prayed for authorities, confusing those who expected curses. They cared for the poor, including outsiders who did not share their beliefs. They adopted exposed infants and tended the sick when others were afraid to approach. Punishment tried to make them smaller. Mercy made them larger. Neighbors might disagree with their claims and still say, "No one loves like these people." And that sentence drew new ears to their tables. Councils kept lists, repeat offenders, known hosts, suspected leaders. The lists travelled with officers who delivered summonses at dawn. A knock on the door was never just a knock. It was a test of whether the household would give up names. The followers often answered with silence about other people and clarity about themselves. They would not trade a brother's safety for a day's peace. Ancient stories usually celebrated heroes who crushed enemies. The records of the early followers instead told of people who refused to become enemies. In hearings they answered without flattery and without rage. In cells they sang quietly. After release they brought bread to homes where the sick lay and the hungry waited. To officials used to loyalty bought with fear, this was a strange arithmetic. Threats did not work the way they should. Pain did not purchase silence. Gentleness did not break. After the arrests, after the warnings, after the lashes, the day after often looked ordinary. Followers went back to their work, mending nets, shaping wood, sweeping thresholds. They met again at night, not to plan retaliation, but to break bread and pray. Someone read a letter passed from another city. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. They nodded because this was what they were learning. Goodness can be stubborn. There was no grand strategy, no secret weapon, no exemption from pain. What kept the movement alive in the years after the resurrection were ordinary acts under pressure, accepting humiliation rather than retaliation, receiving floggings rather than lying, enduring exclusion and poverty, refusing to abandon one another, and continuing to speak a simple claim: He is alive. None of this is dramatic in the way legends often are. All of it is steady in a way that satisfies history. To understand the early followers under arrest is to understand the movement they carried. It did not spread by power or cleverness, but by witness. People telling what they believed they had seen and living as if love were stronger than shame. When a follower walked home with welts on his chest, when a woman lost her clients because she opened her door, when a family broke apart and still the table stayed open, a different kingdom was being announced. So imagine the city again. Lamps glowing in a narrow lane. A door opening to a small room where a few sit quietly. Bread is broken. A cup is passed. Someone whispers a prayer for the rulers who signed the order against them. Someone else asks for courage to speak with kindness at tomorrow's hearing. They are not many. They are not strong. They are hunted sometimes, ignored often, misunderstood almost always. But in a world that believes only force can change anything, they refuse to hate, they refuse to lie, and they refuse to stop. And that refusal, gentle, wounded, and steadfast, outlives the courts that condemned them and the stones that bruised them. After the resurrection, this is how Jesus' followers were treated: detained, interrogated, shamed, flogged, and excluded. And this is how they answered: with truth on their lips, bread in their hands, and love that would not withdraw.